Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Today's episode is going to be titled, We All Cope Differently. We all cope with pain in our own unique ways. This simple truth is something we often forget, even though it profoundly affects how we handle life's challenges. Recently, I was speaking with a friend about her most painful emotional experience, losing her grandfather. She described it as a devastating loss, one that shattered her heart and left her feeling utterly broken. Her story reminded me of how individual and deeply personal the grieving process is. No two people respond to pain the same way. The way she copes is different from how I, my family, or even my neighbors would approach similar loss. Yet, this diversity in coping mechanisms is often misunderstood or judged. When people are in pain, they instinctively turn to things that bring them comfort, even if only temporarily. For some, it's indulging in their favorite foods, a little extra ice cream, or a couple more bags of chips than usual. Others might lose themselves in movies, video games, or even alcohol. These habits aren't always healthy, but they serve a purpose. They help people endure the weight of their pain, even if just for a moment. It's easy to criticize these behaviors from the outside, but those moments of indulgence often feel like survival to someone who's hurting. Take me, for example. Music is my lifeline during tough times. When life feels unbearable, I put on songs that resonate with my emotions, and sometimes I let the tears flow. There's something healing about crying to music. It's a release, a way to process feelings that are too big for words. Pair that with a favorite meal, and it becomes a small act of self care in the midst of chaos. These rituals, as simple as they are, help me find peace when the world feels heavy. But not everyone understands this. Too often, people judge others for how they cope. I've heard people say things like, if you were strong, you wouldn't need to drink, or real men don't fall apart like that. Comments like these don't just hurt, they undermine the very process someone needs to heal. Who are we to dictate how someone should navigate their pain? Pain is deeply personal, and so is the way we respond to it. What works for one person might not work for another, and that's okay. The problem is, judgment seems to be a default setting for many. It's almost as if people feel entitled to critique others' coping mechanisms, forgetting that their own might not hold up under scrutiny. Imagine someone judging another for turning to food or alcohol to get through a tough time, only to later find themselves binge watching TV to escape their own stress. Hypocrisy is easy when you're not the one suffering. It's also important to note that judgment often comes at the worst possible time. When someone is in the middle of coping, they're already vulnerable. Criticizing them then is like kicking them when they're down. It reveals more about the person doing the judging than the one being judged. It's a reflection of their character or lack thereof. Compassion, not criticism, should be the response to someone in pain. What's truly baffling is how some people act as though there's a right way to cope. They seem to think there's a universal standard for handling grief or hardship, and anyone who deviates from that is weak or flawed. This mindset is not only unfair, but also harmful. It invalidates the very real struggles people face and alienates them during a time when they need understanding the most. We live in a world where judgment is constant. People will find a reason to critique you no matter what you do. Whether it's about your career, relationships, or how you handle pain, someone will always have an opinion. That's just the reality of life. But when it comes to coping, the stakes feel higher. Judging someone for how they heal adds insult to injury. It's an attack on their humanity during a time of vulnerability. It's good to remember that everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. Coping isn't about perfection, it's about survival. Some people might stumble and make choices that aren't ideal, but that doesn't make them weak. It makes them human. Pain has a way of breaking us down, and healing is rarely a linear process. It's messy, unpredictable, and deeply personal. Rather than judge, we should strive to support one another. A kind word, a listening ear, or even just giving someone the space to cope in their own way can make a world of difference. The last thing anyone needs when they're struggling is to feel isolated or shamed. Empathy is what bridges the gap between us and reminds us of our shared humanity. At the end of the day, coping is about finding what works for you. It's not about meeting someone else's standards or earning their approval. Whether it's crying to music, eating comfort food, or escaping into a favorite hobby, what matters is that it helps you get through the pain. And if others don't understand or approve, that's their problem, not yours. Life will always bring challenges, and people will always have their opinions. But when it comes to coping, the most important thing is to honor your process. Let others judge if they must, but don't let their judgment rob you of what you need to heal. Pain is universal, but the way we cope is uniquely our own, and that's something worth respecting. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Signing out. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye for now.